Bon dia a tothom, benvinguts, benvingudes a la 32a Lliçó inaugural d'Economia, en aquest cas la del curs 2022-2023. Welcome to everyone and thank you very much to Professor Fiona to be here, Fiona Scott, to be here with us. Let me just dir bon dia també al degà, en Walter García Fontes, a la professora Rosa Ferrer, que farà la introducció. And now the Dean will give a speech.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Scott Morton, to be with us today. And thanks, Rector. And thanks, Rosa Ferrer, to be with us. Professor Rosa Ferrer, who's going to give a brief introduction to Professor Scott Morton. So let me say a couple of words in Catalan. Primer de tot, benvinguts a la nova generació que tenim amb nosaltres, promoció 2022-2026. M'agrada veure'ls per aquí, alguns de vosaltres, i també benvinguts als alumnes que ja estaven per aquí aquests anys. Voldria també donar una benvinguda a tota la comunitat de la facultat, al professorat, al personal d'administració i serveis, òbviament, que tenim amb nosaltres a la nostra facultat. Unes breus paraules. Simplement estem molt contents tots d'estar ja en un curs absolutament plenament normal i ara ens adonem el privilegi que tenim de poder gaudir d'un curs, diguem-ne, com ha de ser una universitat presencial amb totes les coses que podem fer i els recursos que tenim a la nostra disposició. És veritat que durant la pandèmia hem après algunes coses útils, alguna cosa bona havia d'haver-hi i tot això de la docència potser híbrida ens dona altres recursos, però la presencialitat és insubstituïble i el que fem cara a cara no es pot substituir, clarament ho hem après, per cap altre recurs, per tècnicament avançat o tecnològicament avançat que sigui. Per tant, hem d'aprofitar al màxim aquesta presencialitat, jo crec, aquesta possibilitat de veure'ns i d'interactuar i de treballar junts. Jo crec que cada edició ho he dit i ho tornaré dient si tingués l'oportunitat de fer altres, que tenim un privilegi d'estar en una universitat pública del tipus de la Universitat Pompeu Fabra, una universitat pública de molta qualitat, contractant el seu professorat a nivell internacional de forma molt competitiva. Això jo crec que és únic. També comptem un personal d'administració i serveis que és molt eficient, molt eficaç i que dona un servei tant als estudiants com a nosaltres, jo crec, de primera línia. I també els nostres estudiants, evidentment, ho sabem per les notes de tall, que mantenen tots els nostres graus, que realment tenim un privilegi de tenir estudiants amb aquesta qualitat. Prestigi i reputació en els nostres graus, jo crec que el que valora el nostre entorn és que es valora el rigor i l'espírit de treball, la dedicació que aconseguim en els nostres graus. I el mercat laboral avui en dia demana gent com una ment flexible, que pugui pensar sobre diversos temes, que pugui realment resoldre problemes seriosos que a vegades són totalment imprevistos, unes situacions de molta incertesa. Jo crec que aquesta preparació sí que l'aconseguim donar en els nostres graus. El nostre enfoc de docència, evidentment, està molt relacionat al nostre enfoc de recerca, en el qual s'exigeix un gran rigor, diguem-ne, en tot el que es fa. I penso que aconseguim proveir-vos amb els coneixements més recents dels diferents àmbits, perquè realment tenim un professorat internacional que està a la frontera de les diverses àrees i jo crec que realment això es nota en els nostres graus. També bé, per acabar, demanaria, com sempre, als estudiants que dotin de vida aquí a la facultat. Hi ha moltes activitats més enllà de les classes que són molt útils per a vosaltres també, perquè les xarxes que feu avui en dia i els coneixements personals us serviran per la resta de les vostres vides i això, evidentment, aquestes xarxes no les podem construir nosaltres com a professors, sinó que les podeu construir vosaltres mateixos. I les iniciatives que feu aquí, tant associacions com individuals, com les que vulgueu fer, també us donen uns certs coneixements de gestió i d'iniciativa i de lideratge que realment s'ha de prendre per un mateix. Bé, no dic res més, us dono la benvinguda un altre cop, us desitjo a tots molt bon curs i bé, passem doncs a l'acte mateix. Gràcies.
continuació intervindrà la professora Rosa Ferri, que farà la presentació de la ponent Fiona Scott Morton.
Bon dia. It's a great pleasure to present Professor Fiona Scott Morton today. Let me actually take the chance to emphasize two clear messages that we can extract from Fiona's curriculum. So Fiona is a full professor at Yale School of Management, one of the best business schools in the world. She has a PhD in economics from MIT, and she has outstanding publications. And she also takes time to actually do policy work. So in 2011 and 12, she actually worked as the chief economist at the Department of Justice, enforcing competition law. So the things she's going to talk about, she doesn't only know them from the academic point of view, but she also knows them from the enforcement point of view. And let me say that, I guess as a first the message, you can also see on her CV that she has also received multiple teaching awards. So as you can see, Fiona's trajectory can prove that it's possible to be a top academic researcher and at the same time a top professor in the class, a top professor excellent at teaching. So being a top researcher is perfectly compatible with being outstanding at teaching. High-quality research and high-quality teaching actually complement each other. And this is actually one of the foundations of Pompeu Fabra University, so we really appreciate that. Also, let me emphasize a second message. Let me first say to Fiona that right now, first-year students, some of them are here, are studying the advantages of specialization. So they're learning that when you specialize, you become more productive. But so your CV could get us in trouble and make me lose my credibility in class. So let me emphasize that how is it possible that someone can be so productive and at the same time work on such a wide variety of topics. So Professor Scott Morton has worked on, of course, economics of antitrust, but also on healthcare markets, patent roles, common ownership, pharmaceutical industry, automobile industry, and even a couple of papers on the wine industry. So how is it possible to be so productive and work on such a wide variety of topics? This is a bit of actually the magic of economics. So Fiona is actually specialized on rigorous empirical tools, in particular on empirical industrial organization in her case. And when you specialize on rigorous tools, actually you can apply them to a wide variety of policy questions. And this is actually what her research shows. So she specialized on the tools, but the tools are very flexible and can be used to answer many questions. And on top of all of this, and let me finish with this, she also contributes by being present in video, by making videos. So students were recently asking me, how come you professors are not present on video social media? Well, actually, Fiona is. You can find her on YouTube, and more importantly, she's actually producing some videos that you can find on her website. I'll try to put actually the link accessible and on the UPF website for you to find, where you can find many more details of what she'll talk today. But let's listen first to the talk, because we are really, really happy to have you here. Thank you.
Well, first, thank you, Rosa, for that very kind introduction. It's great to be here with all of you. It's just a lovely city and lovely university that you have. I've enjoyed visiting Barcelona before, and this time the same, so it's really fun. My videos are not on YouTube, by the way. They're just on the Yale website, because I think YouTube is too commercial and trashy looking with all of the ads and stuff around it. So they are just hosted in a very clean place that is blue, a blue background like this one, because of the colors of my university. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about digital platforms. These are the ones that you are familiar with, I think, because of your age. So Google, Facebook, maybe not Facebook because you're young, but you might not know that Facebook owns Instagram, for example, and WhatsApp, and Apple, and so forth. Okay, so let's get started. For those of you who don't realize what has been happening in competition enforcement, particularly in the US, but a little bit in Europe also, has been sliding backwards for about 40 years since something called the Chicago School happened in the late 1970s. And that Chicago School movement said, we really shouldn't touch markets. The markets will be fine by themselves. The state shouldn't intervene. And we've had a series of antitrust cases, legal cases in the US that have moved the ability of courts, of the government to set rules of the road to make competition that have weakened that process. And I have some sites up here that will be familiar to some of you if you follow US law, but probably not most of you. What happens when you stop intervening to prevent monopolists from forming or merging to monopoly? Well, you get more market power. And what would be a sign of that market power would be statistics like the share of corporate profit in the national economy or markups rising. Okay, and we have researched some of it done in this institution on those kinds of issues. So we're starting to accumulate evidence that this lack of competition enforcement has real impact. Okay, but at the same time that we have been moving backwards in the enforcement, the economy has leapt forward. So what do I mean by that? We have moved from the industrial economy to the new economy. Instead of thinking about a steel factory with a large amount of variable cost because you have to buy iron ore and you have to smelt it and use energy and pay wages. Now we have products where there's very high fixed costs and hardly any marginal costs. So that would be financial services, media, pharmaceuticals, all these digital platforms. Okay, there's not really a vertical chain of production anymore. Instead, we have an ecosystem where we have some maps and some data and some email and some search, and it's all part of one ecosystem that's generated to make money for the platform. So this is our new way of running our economy, and it's actually a little bit tricky. So the economic analysis for the new economy has been around for some decades now, and a number of your professors have contributed to this body of knowledge, and you should be learning it in the classroom. It's not new. The new economy has often low or zero marginal costs, strong network effects, right? Why are you on Instagram? Because your friends are on Instagram. Lots of differentiation. I use Instagram for brands. I use WhatsApp to organize drinks on Saturday night. Innovation competition is a main source of competition. When you're choosing between social media applications, you don't think which one is cheapest because you're not paying for any of them. You're thinking you're not paying a monetary price for them. You're paying with your attention. So how do they get you to sign up? Well, they have to offer something differentiated and new and exciting. It's not because they are charging 9 euros instead of 10 euros. So price is often not the reason why we get entry, and the reason we choose among products in the new economy is often not the monetary price, but something about either the quality, like the number of ads, or something about innovation. Potential and nascent competition is really important. If we have a nascent entrant like Instagram that's threatening Facebook, that might be the reason that we get competition for Facebook. And if we shut down that nascent entry, we perhaps never get competition for Facebook. It's not like a car company where you might have 5 car companies in the market, all with 20% market share, and everyone's happy choosing among cars. When you have strong network effects, you need to have everybody able to communicate with each other. We have one phone system because of network effects. There's probably one social platform that you use to organize your drinks with your friends or study groups or whatever it is you're doing in your free time. Hopefully study groups, not drinking. Okay, so what do these features all mean? They mean that the new economy is actually quite a difficult place for competition enforcement. Differentiation among products is critical. Okay, so we often have very low substitution across products. Entrenchment and market power is really significant. Think of how many years Google has been the dominant search engine. Think about how many years Apple has had Apple and Google together have been the dominant mobile phone operating systems. Think about how many years people who are 50 years old have been organizing their children's activities, their alumni, their school, their neighborhood activities on Facebook, sharing their vacation photos. People my age are on Facebook constantly, and they don't go somewhere else. They don't go to TikTok to share their vacation photos. Markups are very large. This shows market power. Competition is often dynamic and disruptive. So when you're going into court to explain that we need competition, the judge might say, well, what is going to be the benefit of competition? And you say innovation. And then the other side says, well, wait, if this merger happens, you have to show us in court the innovations that would be blocked. Okay, well, how am I don't know what innovations are going to happen tomorrow. That's the whole definition of innovation. We don't know what it is right now. So saying to a judge, well, here are the innovations that will not happen because of the merger is an impossible thing to do. So this is the direction we are headed in the United States with this kind of level of proof and type of discussion when we are talking about very important issues like how to maintain competition and innovation. Okay, so there's I'm going to make 3 points, and then I'm going to talk to you actually about a few specific platforms that you may know and love, and that I know and love a little bit less. Okay, so the 3 points. First, the new economy requires better and more vigorous competition enforcement than we had before. So I think you can quickly see from that list of characteristics that competition is naturally weaker in these new economy markets. And why is that? Because we have this differentiation and network effects, and you can see it from the high markups. There's just not as much head-to-head competition in the way there would be when you go out to buy a car, okay, or when you go out to choose a coffee. More barriers to entry, harder to erode competitive barriers once they're built up. So you need competition enforcement to be stricter because these are naturally more concentrated markets to begin with. There's less head-to-head competition to begin with, and so you have to have the government authorities being a bit more vigorous. And they have to be more, not only stronger, but more accurate and focused, because we have to do a better job at finding the nascent competitor before it is very big. Because let me tell you, the incumbent in that market sees that nascent competitor far before anyone working in the government sees them. And when they see them, they are going to either try to buy them or squash them. Buy or bury is the new technique. You can go home to your mother and say, I learned something today, buy or bury. Okay, so you buy or bury your nascent competitor, and then this stops the network effects from shifting over to that nascent competitor. So it's hard, it's very hard. The new economy requires advances in regulation in addition to competition enforcement. Sometimes I think people think that competition enforcement and regulation are alternatives, but in fact we want them to be working together as much as possible. And when you have innovation as being a main source of competition, you need to think about what does that mean for regulation? Well, products are more new. We have a quicker cycle. They're novel in areas that people are less familiar with. So for example, online reviews. Is there a regulator making sure that online reviews are not fake? That the seller is not paying for the online reviews? That the online reviews are not being generated by bots, okay? So when you have innovation as a source of competition, it's harder to regulate product quality and conditions for entry and so on. And evaluation of welfare is also more difficult because we have uncertain outcomes and uncertain products and new products that we don't understand as well. So we have to work on regulation in that sense. We also have to think about regulation being, again, needing to be brought up to a more tough level, because when margins are so high it's very, very tempting to cheat. So for example, if there is an auction to win the spot for an advertisement at the top of the page, then let's imagine there are different, you have searched for handbags or a luxury handbag or designer handbag. There will be a bunch of sellers of those handbags that want the ad at the top of the page. Who is willing to pay the most for that ad? Well, it will be the handbag seller with the largest margin. Which handbag seller will have the largest margin? Probably the one with the counterfeit handbag, right? Their margin is really huge. So they are going to win the ad. The ad is at the top of the page. We all have behavioral biases, and we click on things that are easy and are at the top. So there will be lots of people who click on that ad because it's at the top of the page. And then there we are supporting the counterfeit seller. So the regulation needs to understand that the incentives that we are creating are really getting strong for bad behavior. And then there's also another part of regulation which is familiar from telecommunications. If I have a wire into my house, then we need to have multiple providers of services having access to that wire, and perhaps we have to make some rules like what are the payment that those providers need to give to the owner of the wire so that the wire makes money and can be sustained as a business. So this is called access pricing. Here in the digital world, a lot of that is going to be not the wire, but actually application programming interfaces, APIs. What APIs do I need to be able to have my messaging service interconnect with WhatsApp? What APIs do I need for my map that I put on my restaurant page to be able to interface with the map of the mapping company? So these kinds of access conditions are going to be, I think, a big, big feature of the world in which you graduate and work in. And then lastly, the large rents that are available in the digital economy. Let's just look at Google, made $250 billion last year, something like that. Okay, that when you have this amount of money at stake, it is very profitable to go out and try to buy the regulator. So let's hire lots of people who used to work at the regulator. Let's take the regulator to lunch every day. Let's take the regulator to football World Cup or whatever it is that makes people in Barcelona think that you're really cool, and just do that constantly and spend lots of money on it to try to influence the way regulations impact the company. Okay, third point, the new economy requires stronger consumer protection, and this came up a little bit in the regulation point as well, but when there's more entrenched firms with more market power, people cannot vote with their feet in the same way. If I think that the car is not safe, I can go buy another car. Why? Well, I have some sense of why the car is not safe because there is a government agency that measures things like crash testing, fuel economy, the size of the engine, and all of these other metrics are known, they are measured, and I can go look them up. And if I don't like them, I can change to another car. Well, you cannot change to another search engine very easily because there is a default installed on your handset that is everywhere. You have a choice of 2 different handsets, that's it. So you cannot vote with your feet, and so the government has to do, I think, a better job of defending people against exploitation of businesses that take all your data and sell it, or monitor your email to determine if you have just broken up with your boyfriend, and then they try to sell you ice cream or makeup or jewelry or something like this. This is the thing. This is the thing on social media. Yeah, they know what's happening in your life. So there are more opportunities for, so that's one, there's exploitation. And then in line with that, there are more opportunities for consumers to make mistakes because in the digital environment, with firms watching your email traffic and doing A/B testing on you all the time, so they will see, okay, Fiona just broke up with her boyfriend, let's see if she will buy ice cream if we put it in a large font, or if we will find someone else who's the same situation and try the small font, or blue, or red, or ice cream, or jewelry, or makeup, or spa visit and experiment to find out what it is that they can get you to buy in that circumstance. So that environment just is very adverse for the consumer. The amount of data that is known, the precision of that data, the timing of that data, and then the ability to exploit. So for example, there are websites that will work out who is a gambling addict and then show that person gambling ads. Or figure out who the financially unsophisticated consumers are and try to sell them exploding mortgages and things that are inappropriate for those people. So these kinds of business models exist, and we need the regulator to protect consumers from them with strong consumer protection rules and enforcement. And a lot of the products that we buy online, these financial services, media products, and so on, they're actually quite hard to understand. Financial services are tricky. Media subscriptions, how much will you consume of that? Do you want to pay per piece or by the month or an annual subscription or one that includes your whole family? These are actually quite difficult products to evaluate for consumers, and so there's a lot of scope for mistakes. Okay, now all of that is a challenge. Those are things we ought to be doing. We're not doing them. So we are a bit of in a whiplash situation where we needed enforcers and courts and regulators to take a leap forward to deal with all of this, and instead they were going backwards. And the result of that is that we are really quite out of line. I would say in the US we're really in a problem. Luckily in Europe, the moving backwards was somewhat less, so the whiplash is still there, but it's a smaller in magnitude because the economy has leapt forward and we need to catch up and deal with it. And we also have courts and often other parts of government that are conservative in the small c sense, by which I mean they just don't like to move very fast. They like to have some certainty and develop the evidence base and not do something that's too different than precedent. Law in particular likes to rely on precedent. And so these parts of our society don't move very fast, and when the economy moves very fast, that creates a mismatch. You have a challenge for the government to keep up. I give an example here, which is interesting because it relates to what Rosa quoted from one of the reports I wrote, which is the judge only last year in a case against Facebook wrote about how he was not sure there could be an antitrust problem because Facebook was free. Okay, and this is of course it's hard to know where to start. I mean, Facebook makes lots and lots of money. It's not free. One side is paying, which is the advertisers, and then the rest of us are the product in the sense that we were, well, you can think of it as the product, or I think it's actually easier to think about it as the workers. We are the workers for Facebook because what Facebook sells is ads, and they need workers to look at the ads. So we are the workers. We come to work. We look at the ads. We are paid for our work by finding some news about what our friends are doing or what somebody went on vacation to do. And then when we finish working, we leave the site, and that's a business model. And there's nothing free happening there. Okay, so we have an acute problem, this moving backwards and moving forwards. Enormous amount of catching up is needed. And we also need to think about how our enforcement agencies can respond. We need new models and new evidence from economists, and I would say this is happening, and this university has many faculty that are contributing to this happening, which is wonderful. We need risk-taking from agencies. I am not seeing so much of that. There's a little bit from the Department of Justice in the United States, but not enough. And I don't mean irresponsible risk-taking. I mean writing down what is happening in the new economy, saying, yes, it's new. And even though it's new, we are going to enforce about it, because if we spend our time enforcing on pencils and bicycles, yes, we know how to do it. These are old products, but when GDP moves and people are buying things that are new, we have a responsibility to enforce in that area also. So that kind of responsible agency work teaches courts not to be simplistic. it's not the case that innovation is two guys in a garage. No, no, no. There's enormous, expensive teams working on artificial intelligence and ways to run cloud computing and so on. It's not simple. A monopolist with network effects is extremely difficult to displace. Nobody wants to leave their friends behind. And I think many of the decision makers that we see in the world or in developed economies, they're very smart, they're very erudite, they have read lots of books, and they are not spending time like you on video games and Snapchat and Instagram. And as a result, they don't understand it. They think that the internet is like the television. You go to the internet and you turn it on, and everything there is like a substitute for everything else. And that's the internet. I think COVID helped a great deal in teaching people that no, the internet is not one thing. You can do financial services on the internet, you can watch video content on the internet, you can communicate with your friends on the internet. These are not substitutes for one another. If my financial services is down, I don't say, oh, I will replace it by talking to my friends. Okay, that's not a substitute in the sense that we think about it in economics. So these are the kinds of ideas that we have to get across to the larger community. So now I thought I would talk about some platforms, and I will maybe do a little polling of the students in the audience about what you use. Has anyone here bought a product from Amazon? Raise your hand if you have. Okay, good. That means you are familiar with this situation. I worked for Amazon as a consultant, an economic consultant, for about a year. I just wanted to tell you that. I'm not working for them anymore. I wanted to talk about a new legal challenge that the state of California brought a couple of months ago. And what this complaint discusses is how Amazon requires, for a long time, Amazon had a contract term requiring third-party merchants not to sell on another website for less than the product was selling on Amazon. So if they charge 100 euros on Amazon, they could not charge 90 euros on a competing platform. Now that contract term was challenged by the European Commission and dropped by Amazon, but it was not dropped in the United States. And then we also know that Amazon puts products at the top of the search results when in response to that same question. So in other words, if the product is being sold for less on another website, then that merchant's listing does not go to the top of the search results. So to get to the top of the search results, you have to have a low price compared to other competing websites. Okay, so economic analysis has a lot to say about this contract term. It's called an MFN. And there is a literature that has been studying MFNs for some decades and shows that if you have MFNs, they cause prices to be higher. Okay, now it sounds like, oh, we are requiring the merchant to set a low price on Amazon. It cannot be higher than any other website, so that must mean we are getting low prices. Well, that is what somebody not trained in economics would think, but all of you know what an equilibrium is. And you can understand that the other websites are able to, the prices on the other websites are able to change. So if I'm a merchant and I want to sell at 100 euros on Amazon, I might have maybe thought about selling at 90 on another website, but when this contract term is in place, I will raise my price on the other website to 100. So it's not that 100 is the lowest price, but it's the lowest price in comparison to other prices that have gone up. So this is what the old literature shows us. The new literature explicitly looks at platform MFNs, a paper by Boyk and Kortz, and finds exactly the same thing, that we get higher prices because of MFNs, and indeed, you don't get a cheap website entering. Imagine if I were a very cheap e-commerce site with very low fees, I didn't take 30%, I had a 10% commission, something very small. Would I want to enter? Well, no, because I can't sell the product for any less. If the merchant is charging 100 on Amazon and has to charge 100 on my site, I don't have a business model. My business model would be, it's kind of a bad site, the shipping is slow, you have to enter your credit card number, it's awkward, but you get to pay 80 euros instead of 100. That's a business model. But if I have to charge 100, why would anyone go there? So the new literature explains this. And the notion of equilibrium is really profound in this setting. If you look out across the economy, in my example, this good is going to be sold for 100 euros everywhere. And so then the judge is going to be confused. Well, wait, how am I getting lower prices? It looks like it's just 100 everywhere, so why does this matter? You have to explain to them about the idea of equilibrium, that there would be an entrant with a different product that was cheaper and attractive to some people in the marketplace. Maybe you, judge, have a good income and a nice suit and you want to buy good products and you would shop on Amazon, but some people would not. Different people would want something different. That's hard to explain in a court. Okay, let's talk about app stores. Okay, how many people here either have an Android handset or an Apple handset? Raise your hand. Okay, how many people here have a handset that is not an Apple handset or an Android handset? Oh, good. Well, we just established market shares and market power, I think. So this is a duopoly. There are only two ways to get apps into to the eyeballs of consumers, and that is to be on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. So these mobile operating systems have, I have also been working for, as an economic consultant for Epic in their case against Google on this topic. So if you've got a Monopoly App Store on your handset, there is no way to get an app to a consumer except through that App Store. There is no side loading on iOS, on Apple. There is side loading on Google, but how many people have side loaded an app onto their Android handset? Raise your hand. Okay, that also very informative. 2. For those of you at the front, there were 2 hands. You get about 20 little pop-ups saying your device is something insecure is being loaded, it's very dangerous, be careful, are you sure you want to do this? So not very many people sideload. So how would we use economic analysis to think about the impact on competition from a monopoly app store? Well, we're going to have to, again, think about equilibrium. If there were multiple app stores, what dimensions of competition might they emphasize? Well, for one thing, those app stores take a 30% fee from the app itself whenever it sells you something. So you could imagine price competition, that if there were an alternative app store, it might offer a 20% commission, or 15, or 10. Then there's curation. Many people complain that the Google Play Store has a lot of garbage in it. Maybe somebody would launch a store that was like the Tasteful App Store, and it would only have nice apps in it. Or perhaps there would be, perhaps Disney would open an app store and it would be content that is safe for people under the age of 12 app store. You can imagine all kinds of things like that. What innovation would result if there were competing stores? Well, what Epic would like to do is have an app store in which you put all your gaming and your history of games and your friends and so on, and you kind of live in that app a lot, rather like WeChat, which is an app that's popular in China. And then if you had a lot of your life in that Epic App Store, you could imagine an entrant like Amazon Fire a number of years ago tried a new operating system that was an Android fork, and it failed. But one of the things that might cause a forked operating system or a new operating system to enter would be if there were a bunch of people on an app that could just move their app to the new operating system and not have to learn how to it would be a low switching cost, and it would be a low learning environment because they would be keeping it with their same set of apps. And so we might imagine that competition in app stores and the ability to have a lot of your life in the app or the app store would increase competition in mobile operating systems. There might be entry because the app store could move smoothly across. And indeed, the analogy that you can think about is that a cross-platform app would be like middleware. For those of you familiar with the famous Microsoft case, the idea in Microsoft was that Java was going to be middleware that would cause us to no longer care what operating system we were using. And that would mean that Windows would no longer have so much market power, because everything would run in Java, and you could have Windows, or you could have Linux, or you could have something else underneath, and it wouldn't matter. So if you had people living their life in an app store, maybe we wouldn't care what mobile operating system was underneath, and that would give opportunities for entry. Okay, so that's the idea. That's where you can go with the competition analysis of something, of an interesting case like these app stores. Okay, let's also talk about Google Search. Does anybody know what the market share of Google Search is in Europe? Yeah, it's over 90%, like 95%. So why is that? That's because there are two ways to get a handset. And if you're a hardware maker that makes an Android handset, you want to have Android as your operating system, then you must agree, until recently, till very recently, you had to agree that Google Search would be the exclusive default search at all search access points on the handset. Okay, so it was going to be, first of all, on the first Chrome, and all the Google apps are on the first page, but then anything that opens in that handset uses Google Search by default. You can go in and change that, but that requires effort. Google also pays Apple about $10 to $12 billion every year to be the exclusive default search provider on all Apple handsets. So now, returning to our market survey that we did just a few minutes ago about handsets, that gives us Google being the exclusive default search engine on all mobile devices in Europe, okay, and the United States. People are quite responsive to defaults. This has been shown over and over again. If you have when you apply for a driver's license in the United States, some states have, you will be an organ donor as a default, and you tick, I do not want to be an organ donor. Other states, when you apply for a driver's license, the default is you are not an organ donor, and you have to tick, I will donate organs. And people in those two different states is dramatically different organ donors. Right? In the first one, where the default is opt-in, like 80% of people are donating organs, and in the other one, 20% of people are donating organs. So we do the default thing very readily, and so this is why Google has a 95% share. All right, how do they keep that share? Well, partially they keep it, of course, through these contracts. And another way they keep it is through page design. So rival search engines who specialize in a particular area, like Expedia, Booking.com in travel, or Yelp in local, what Google has done is when you search for something in travel, the Booking link is far down and Google Flights is at the top. And if Booking wants to be at the top, they can pay for an ad to be at the top, but then, of course, their costs are higher because they are paying for an ad. So this pushing the specialized vertical search down the page is very effective in causing no one to click on it because, as you all know, you want to click on something that's on the first page. Okay, so economists can answer questions like, which I get all the time, Google's the highest quality, so shouldn't they have a high share? Well, what is a feature of the new economy is, where does quality come from? Quality comes from usage. And if many millions of people use your search engine, it is better than a search engine without people using it. So if I have an exclusive default, I have usage. If I have usage, I have quality. If I have quality, then the handset maker doesn't mind making me the exclusive default. And it's just self-perpetuating and nobody else can get in. Another question I get often is, would prohibiting these exclusive defaults that Google purchases from Apple and from other handset makers, would that raise the cost of handsets? Because now we're going to have to charge them for Android, for example, if they cannot, if Google can't get the search revenue. Well, the revenue share that Google gives to Android handset makers is in the single digits, maybe 10, maybe as high as 15%, if they're particularly good at putting Google content at the front and all rival content at the back of the phone. The revenue share that Apple gets, and Apple has choices. They don't have to use Google. They could use Bing, or they could make their own. Their revenue share, we think, is closer to 50%. Now, if I were a handset maker who could trade off freely, I could go talk to Bing and Google and Neva and Yandex and have a big negotiation with all of them and say, who will give me the best deal? I think a handset maker could probably get 70% of the search revenue. Now, if I'm a no-name handset maker and I am going to get 2 or 3 years of 70% of search revenue from you, that's hundreds and hundreds of euros. So what would happen to my incentive to sell a handset? Those handsets might come down in price quite a lot. Right? We might be seeing handsets that were sold for prices close to 0 or 50 or 100 because the search revenue would be so large. So that's the kind of, and that again, we're using our notion of equilibrium. What happens if we free up these contracts? Everybody can make a new deal. What would the repricing and entry and quality look like? So this is just 2 of the very interesting issues that come up in Google search. Okay. I'm going to close. How am I doing on time? Oh, good. I have 10 minutes. So I want to talk about the DMA in my remaining time. This is extremely exciting. The Digital Markets Act was agreed in April and officially made law just a month or so ago in its final form with all the punctuation and everything done correctly. And it begins in 2 months in the sense that in 2023 will be the designation of the platforms that are going to be regulated. And in 2024, they have to begin actually complying with the rules. So what are those rules? One of the first rules is, you'll not be surprised to learn, rival app stores must be allowed onto a handset. And there's several different ways in which this rule shows up in the law. So first, it just says you have to allow on rival app stores, but then also that app stores must abide by FRAND conditions, fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. That means somebody is going to complain about the 30%, like Spotify, and say, this is not a FRAND price, I want to pay less. Thirdly, the DMA requires side loading. So that means that Apple is going to say, well, this is very dangerous. There'll be apps with viruses that people will sideload onto our phone, and we don't like that. Fourthly, there is a rule that says that the app owner, like Spotify, must be allowed to communicate independently and however they want with the end user, so that Spotify can say, oh, actually don't buy a subscription to Spotify through the App Store, because if you do, then we have to pay 30% fee to Apple, and so we're going to charge you 13 euros in the store, but only 10 euros if you come and find us on the web and subscribe on the web. And by the way, the DMA requires that any content you buy off of the App Store must be accessible through on the App Store. So if you subscribe to Spotify just on your home computer, once you are a member of Spotify, then you can listen to music on your handset. Okay, you can use the content you have purchased on the handset. So this App Store issue is going to be, I think, one of the first that we see where the DMA has an impact. Another topic in the DMA is that it prohibits bias in search rankings of any kind, as well as tying of Google search and browser, or Google search and the operating system. So what's going to happen if there can't be bias in these search rankings anymore, and we see Booking.com near the top of the list? If the handset makers don't have to use Google search, are they going to strike some contracts with rivals and bring them in? Is Google going to find some other way to either incentivize or threaten the handset makers to continue using Google search? That's where they make all their money, by the way, is search. This will be very interesting to watch. several more that are going to be really fun to watch. One is ad tech. So this is the process of selling an ad, and this is quite complicated. You have newspapers on the one side, and let's say automobile company on the other side, and the Peugeot wants to place an ad in the newspaper, and so they have a tool that helps them place ads across lots of different properties, and then the online newspaper or website, recipe site, Catalan recipes you love, is wanting to sell ads, and then they have some open space, and when you go to the recipe site, that triggers a process by which the tool that the recipe site uses, a publisher tool, goes to an exchange, and the Peugeot ad tool goes to an exchange, and there's an auction which company is willing to pay the most to get in front of your eyeballs on the recipe site. All parts of that are dominated by Google. The advertiser tools, Google has a 90% share. The publisher tools, Google has a 90% share, and the exchange in the middle, Google has a 50% share. And there's lots of description of all the ways that Google sets the rules for the auction such that the advertiser is paying, let's say, €1, the publisher is getting 50 cents, and Google is keeping the middle. And what we want is for the advertiser to pay 80 euro cents and the publisher to get 75, and the middle to be a lot cheaper because it is all just automated technology. So what does the DMA say about that? Well, it says there has to be much more transparency. What is happening to this 50 euro cents? That both sides have to have tools that they can use to go in and see what happened, track the money, understand the returns and where it was going. And then also the use of the data, of course. The problem for rivals is that if Google knows that I am interested in buying a car, then that's a very valuable ad opportunity. If a rival doesn't realize that I am interested in buying a car because they have not been reading my email, okay, then they are going to have trouble advertising. So the use of data is about, can you use what I'm doing on email in another part of your business, like selling ads, and the DMA prohibits that also. One that I'm particularly excited about, something in the DMA that I think will be really important, is interoperability. Number-independent messaging is going to be required to be interoperable. What does that mean? That means that WhatsApp, for example, cannot prevent another messaging app from being able to connect and send messages to users on WhatsApp who are perhaps not on their messaging app. So think about it if, it's easiest to think about it in a context like phones. What if Vodafone users could only call other Vodafone users and could not call T-Mobile users? That would be really annoying. A lot of your friends you wouldn't be able to phone with your telephone, and of course, we would end up with one mobile phone company because everyone wants to call everyone. So this is a little bit what we have in messaging. We have a lot of multi-homing. I have many messaging apps on my phone because different people use different ones. And the idea here is to try to allow them to interconnect so that we can get messages across these apps more easily and diminish network effects. Instead of network effects being very strong for WhatsApp, if other messaging apps can get in, the network effects become broader and they become across all apps together. So that would increase the intensity of competition, because if I didn't like the behavior of one of these apps, like let's say one of them was bought by Elon Musk, just to pick a random example, and I decided I didn't want to be his customer, I could move to another app and then perhaps I could interact there. And then we haven't talked much about the DMA's impact on Amazon. One of the other rules in the DMA that is interesting is that the platform may not use the data from the business user to compete against the business user. So the idea here is that if Amazon knows a lot about me, then they either can share that information with the seller of the good, or they can not use it at all when they're selling their own Amazon products. And the idea of that is to somehow level the playing field between the Amazon products and and the third-party merchant products. All of these, you'll notice, are really they're focused on the business users. So when you think about who's going to benefit from rival app stores, it's mostly the app developers who are paying 30%. So we're talking about Spotify and Epic and gaming and dating apps and things like that that pay a lot of money. When you think about the search rankings, you're talking about other rival search engines and Booking.com and so on. And when you're thinking about ad tech, again, it's the business users. The DMA is really set up to be about the business users, but if we have lots of competition among business users and innovation and entry, that then gives us services in innovation. So it's helpful for consumers also. Okay, so let me wrap up and just say the role for economics here is huge. You have picked a very good subject at a very good time. And I just want to remind you that economics is not only used by monopolists to defend themselves, it's used by enforcers to try to defend people and consumers. And it's a discipline that creates tremendous clarity and requires disciplined thinking about what has gone wrong in a market. And then the use of economics and all of the work of your professors here and around the world are starting to respond to this need that we have with the new economy in terms of empirical evidence, more relevant theory, more crossover work into law, and then this will hopefully give us some progress. I will just end with just a tiny caveat, which is sometimes we don't make progress, and that doesn't mean that things aren't important. So if we can't figure out how to predict innovation, that just might be a tool economics doesn't have. That doesn't mean innovation isn't important. We have tools for some things and no tools for some things, and the importance of the problem is often, unfortunately, uncorrelated with whether we have a tool or not. But we should go out and develop tools and use them. All right, thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Should I ask for some questions? Yes. So you all use these platforms. You must have a question. Yes. Yeah. Well, I don't think we want the attention economy. That's a bit like my example of turn on the internet and everything there is a substitute. I mean, if you believe the attention economy, then you would look at me on a Saturday afternoon and you would say, oh, well, books are a substitute for walking, which is a substitute for going to the theater, which is a substitute for eating. You know, no, I just happen to do all of those things on the same day. So I don't think the attention economy is the right way to do it. I think we need to look at what is the objective and functionality of that digital activity. So if I am watching videos on YouTube, that's fun, but maybe actually the closest substitute would be watching videos that come from my television and not sharing stories about my vacation on Facebook or Instagram, which is like a different function. I'm finding out what my friends have been up to. So we need to think about what actually the users would do in terms of that activity and the actual specifics of that activity.
And how do you capture measures such as Facebook or Instagram, which is saying, well, we don't compete at all?
Well, every merger is different. And at the time, Facebook and Instagram said, well, Facebook does text and Instagram does photos, so we don't compete. Okay, that turned out to be, not a very plausible story because now every social media site has text and video. But the plasticity of a lot of digital business models are a challenge for law enforcement. So, for example, at one point, well, let me give you a different example. WhatsApp has just sends messages, and it's not really the place that you go to share your vacation pictures with your college roommates. But WhatsApp has a very good, enormous installed base and a very good social graph. Imagine if Google or Apple or, I don't know, Oracle bought WhatsApp and said, right, we're turning this into Facebook. Like, we're just going to expand. No, I shouldn't say that. That would be bad because we don't want more hate speech and neo-Nazis and stuff. What if they said, we're going to take WhatsApp and give it more functionality to let you have groups and share photos and make it a bit more like a social media site similar to Facebook. That would not be difficult to do at a technical level, right? So then you have to ask, well, is WhatsApp a substitute for Facebook? Okay, not today. They do different things. Well, they're owned by the same company, so they're purposefully differentiated, right? We know that Facebook is made to look different from Instagram, from WhatsApp, because it's all owned by the same corporation. But arguably, why did Mark Zuckerberg buy Instagram and WhatsApp? Because they could pretty easily be turned into a thing that was going to be quite a close substitute to Facebook. And if I am an entrepreneur starting up, I don't start up and say, I'm going to make another WhatsApp. It's going to be identical to WhatsApp, no difference at all, and give me some venture capital money, right? That's not going to work. You have to start out saying you're doing something different. So there's not going to be a nascent entrant that gets bought who's doing exactly the same thing as the incumbent, because that would just, we know enough economics to know that would never happen. Yes. There's a microphone if you want to.
Thank you. From my understanding, the DMAs would function in the US, or they will also incorporate European or other firms, and if not, then wouldn't that shift the attention of the big companies that are US-based to this
Yes.
branch?
So this is a really, really interesting point. What will the impact of the DMA be on the rest of the world? The DMA officially applies, of course, in Europe. It's a European law. But if you are Apple and Google and thinking about letting in a rival app store, are you just going to do that in Europe? And if those rival app stores are really fun, like there's a Disney app store and an Epic app store and people love them, you're going to have people like me flying over to Barcelona to buy our phones and then flying home again. And is that a world that Apple and Google want to be in, or do they just want to have one platform for the whole globe? This is a really interesting question. I think we don't know. It might be that if you're making 30% off of all the sales in the App Store, it's very expensive to deploy across the whole world. And so you might choose not to do that and run like a competitive business model in Europe and an exploitative business model in North America, and there it is. But then that will be interesting for the people in North America to watch, because then they'll be watching all of this innovation and entry and new kinds of apps and functionalities happening for people in Europe that they don't have access to because there's a, market power. So, or maybe the DMA will crash and burn. Someone will do something very foolish with it, and you won't have any handsets in Europe, and then the Americans will say, see, the market is best left untouched. So we don't know, but I suspect there will be different responses by different platforms, that some will choose to respond globally to something they think complies with the DMA, and others will choose to respond in geographic, on a regional basis.
So these communication services or systems are not something new, I understand. I mean, mail post, and this has been around for a lot of time, and it has usually been taken out of the private sphere and, just used as a natural monopoly, but owned by the government. So why is it not being debated by the governments to just take this messaging out of the private hands and bring it on public hands, and just make a monopoly, the citizens will harness the benefits of this? monopoly.
Okay, so this is a good dissertation topic. I think you should run with it. I mean, your point is very valid. We had Postal Service, and of course, the network effects there are large, and the government owned it. Then we invented the telephone, and in most, well, some places probably nationalized the telephone, but lots of places just heavily regulated the telephone. So you had a national telephone provider that was perhaps a private firm, but the prices were regulated and the universal service and so on, terms of service were regulated. I think it's quite reasonable to think about having APIs, the APIs in the DMA, maybe giving us something similar to that. Like everything has, there will be one giant network basically, and you choose which provider you want to sign up with, but then whatever that provider, you have access to the whole network through your provider. Luigi Zingales proposed this for Facebook last spring in the US to make Facebook into a regulate them into just running the underlying network and flows of data, and then authorizing, like having APIs so that anybody could pick a host to curate their feed. So Facebook would not curate anymore. They would just pass things around, like in pipes. And then you would choose a host, and you could pick a host that would be like, I will filter out all the hate speech, or a host that would say, our feed is going to make you feel happy every day, or whatever, or this will be emphasizing sports or something.
So there's people actually proposing like a public utility regime, like the one that, you know, there's the rail system, and who operates the rail system, and then there are the companies on that.
Yes, there are some journalists who are saying this, and some a school of lawyers, but not really economists.
Okay.
That I know of.
Okay.
So
thank you.
much. Yeah.
Have time for one more question?
One more question. Don't be shy. Does somebody love their platform and want to defend it? That's always fun.
From a geopolitical standpoint, I guess that those companies might be considered as a geopolitical weapon, because I think about maybe the TikTok case that the US government said it was kind of used by the Chinese government to get information and so on. So might it be that the US government is kind of reluctant to weaken those super big enterprises because it somehow might benefit them from a geopolitical standpoint?
I don't think so, because they are not used in China. And I hope that we are not spying on Europeans through Facebook. That would be unfortunate. No, I don't think, I think the idea of national champions is really dreadful. That the way that you make a strong society is to have robust competition for the consumers in your society so that they have lots of choice and lots of safe choices. I think it's completely reasonable, of course, to restrict disinformation about elections, to be worried about the ownership of platforms if it is going to cause harm. But, so let me leave that aside and just talk about the national champions idea, which I think really involves a government picking a winner, and then the winner doesn't have to run very fast because they're in a running race with nobody else. They're just the only one, and you don't get innovation and as good quality, I think, when you have that approach. So I think it's a bad idea. Okay.
Thank you very much, Fiona, for this inspiring lecture about a topic that affects us not only as economists, but also as citizens. And now we know that we are employers or workers from Facebook, and probably in some days also from Twitter and so on. So thank you very much. Just to finish, to say welcome to all the students of newcomers to this faculty. Aquest any 761 nou estudiants us incorporeu a la facultat, estudiants de grau, de màster, de doctorat, i, com possiblement sabeu, aquesta facultat, aquest departament d'Economia i Empresa, a nivell internacional és molt apreciat. En els darrers mesos i setmanes han sortit alguns rànquings, de fet els 3 més importants, que són el Times Higher Education, Shanghai i QS. En Times Higher aquest departament es considera el 85 del món. Algú dirà 85, tampoc és tant, no? Heu de pensar que hi ha 30.000 universitats al món. No totes tenen departament d'economia, però quasi totes sí. En el rànquing de Shanghai aquest departament és el 40 del món i en el QS el 24 del món. Això vol dir un departament que és el primer de l'estat espanyol i també dels primers d'Europa. Dir també, segurament heu comprovat aquest any, els que heu començat, que quan heu arribat heu tingut la setmana de benvinguda. Molts de vosaltres veureu en algunes assignatures el nou marc docent pel que en diem evolució. La universitat va apostar per aquest marc docent ja fa 4 anys i, per tant, és una mostra que és una universitat intensiva en recerca, però que també la docència és molt important. And I also want to congratulate Fiona, Scott, for your awards, not only research awards, but also teaching awards, as Rosa Ferrer has mentioned. Per tant, benvinguts i benvingudes a tothom. Welcome to this Faculty of Economics and Business, or Department of Economics and Business, and I wish you the best this year and in the coming years. And as the Dean has mentioned, here you have a university, it's a public university, you have infrastructures who are very good, you have also the faculty, you have the staff, the administration staff, but at the end the outcome, the final outcome depends a lot on your participation, your implication, and of course any suggestion you have, anything you can do during these years will be very good for the university, but also for you. Thank you very much and welcome. I declarem inaugurat l'any acadèmic. Bon dia a tothom.